In the heart of a high-end, glass-walled restaurant, a tired, ragged man walked in. Instantly, the staff pulled back, whispering, staring, everyone except Jeremiah. While the stranger quietly asked for nothing more than a glass of water, Jeremiah stepped forward with compassion, placing a warm, full plate of food in front of him, free of charge. And even though the manager was squeezing his tips, pushing him to the edge, Jeremiah had no idea that this simple act of kindness would come back to him in a way he never expected. Because the man he helped that night was the one person who held the power to change his entire life forever. It had started like any other busy evening at the Lantern Room. The Lantern Room sat on the 12th floor of a downtown hotel, all glass and glow. Soft jazz from the speakers, chandeliers like upside-down trees, and white tablecloths pressed so sharp they almost shone. Jeremiah Brooks moved through it like he'd been born there. He was 42, broad-shouldered, dark skin catching the warm light, black curls cropped close. His shirt was spotless, his tie straight, his shoes too tight and too old. His smile was easy and practiced, the kind that made guests relax even while his knees burned and his lower back begged for a chair. Table 16 needs their wine, he reminded himself. 10 is waiting on entrees. 4 asked for decaf. Don't miss the decaf. He carried all of it in his head. Orders, faces, allergies, and under all of that, one number, insulin. How much was left in the bottle at home? How many days until his daughter's prescription ran out? How many hours he had to stay on his feet to keep her safe? "Evening, folks," he said, setting plates down at table 10, voice smooth as the background music. "Salmon for you, ribeye medium for you. Anything else I can bring?" The couple nodded, thanked him, took a photo of their plates, smiled for Instagram. Nobody ever took pictures of the tired man behind the tray. Across the room, near the host stand, his manager watched. Blake Carter. Sharp suit, perfect hair, strong cologne that floated ahead of him like a warning. He didn't walk so much as glide, one hand always on his tablet, the other tucking in his tie as if a camera might catch him any second. He snapped his fingers softly in Jeremiah's direction. "Jay," Blake called, not quite loud enough for the diners, but loud enough to carry. "They've been at table 4 for an hour. Move them along. We need that table back." Jeremiah glanced over. An older couple sat side by side, hands almost touching, sharing a slice of cheesecake and taking their time. They looked like they'd saved up for this night. "They just ordered coffee," Jeremiah said quietly. "I can—" "Jay," Blake cut in, teeth still showing in that wide, empty smile. "We are not a living room. Kindly give them the hint, yeah? People are waiting." Jeremiah's jaw flexed. He swallowed the words that rose in his throat and nodded. "Yes, sir." He walked over to the couple, his smile back in place, gentle and apologetic. "Folks," he said softly, "I hate to rush you, but we do have guests waiting on this table. Take your time finishing. I'll bring your bill when you're ready." The woman's face fell. The man folded the receipt without looking at it, slid a $10 bill on top, and stood. "Guess we're not wanted," the woman muttered. Jeremiah wanted to say, "You are. I'm glad you're here. Stay as long as you like." Instead, he said, "I'm so sorry. Thank you for coming in," and pulled their chairs in gently as they left. Blake drifted by, clapping Jeremiah on the shoulder like they were teammates. "See?" Blake said. "Efficient. That's how we keep this place alive." He walked off before Jeremiah could answer. By 10:30, the piano had gone quiet. The last guests stepped into the elevator, ties loosened, heels dangling from fingers. The city, outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, glittered, while inside, everything sagged. "All right, crew," Blake called from the bar, his voice bright and false. "Let's wrap it up. Tip time." The servers gathered at the polished wood bar. Jeremiah, Nora, Luis, Tasha. All of them had that same worn, end-of-shift look. All of them reached into their aprons and pockets and pulled out the little scraps of hope they'd earned that night. Jeremiah thumbed through his stack one last time before dropping it into the large glass jar Blake had set out. He'd been keeping track in his head, table by table, receipt by receipt, 310 in cash, plus the credit card tips which would hit later. A good night, maybe enough to cover most of his daughter's next refill. The other servers added their tips too. The jar looked full, stuffed with bills and folded slips. Blake picked it up and turned his back. Always his back. He faced the liquor shelves, shoulders hunched slightly, head bent down. From where the servers stood, they could see the tension in his suit jacket, the little motions of his hands, but not what those hands were doing. The room went quiet except for the faint clink of glass and the soft whisper of paper. Jeremiah stared at the jar. He had stared many nights. He had done the math many nights, and it just never quite matched. Blake turned around with 4 white envelopes in his hand. "Not bad, not bad," Blake said, smile back in place. "Altogether, we're at 820 for the night." Jeremiah felt his stomach dip. No way, he thought. That should be over 1,000. Blake started passing out the envelopes. "For you, Nora. You, Luis. You, Tasha. And for you, Jay." Jeremiah opened his. $68. He looked at the number, then at the jar, then at Blake. Across from him, Nora frowned and held up her own envelope. "This can't be right," she said. "I had that party of 8. They left 50 on the card." Blake's smile didn't move, but his eyes cooled. "Lot of small tippers tonight," he said. "Lot of folks just paying the bill and bouncing. It happens. Trust me, the math is solid. We good?" It wasn't a question. Jeremiah knew what happened to people who pushed too hard. They found themselves on lunch shifts, or cut from the schedule by mistake, or simply gone. He slid the envelope into his pocket. "Yeah," he said quietly. "We're good." The staff scattered to finish closing. Jeremiah slipped into the tiny employee room, the one with the crooked chair and the vending machine that ate singles. He sat, reached for his wallet, and pulled out a manila envelope, the edges soft and worn. Across the front, in dark blue ink, were 4 words: Maya's school and medical. His daughter's name. Inside were thin slips of paper, each covered in his neat handwriting. He took a fresh slip and wrote, "Friday, March 11th. My tables, about $310. Blake's count, $68. He added it to the stack. Dozens of them now. Dozens of nights where the numbers didn't make sense. He stared at the envelope for a long moment. "Who's gonna believe you?" he murmured to himself. "You're just the guy carrying plates." His phone buzzed. A text from his ex-wife, Carla. "Pharmacy says refill is ready. $360 after insurance. We don't have it, Jay." He closed his eyes. He pictured Maya's small brown hands reaching for her meter. Her brave little smile when he'd told her, "We're okay, baby. Daddy's got it." He had said that so many times he could almost believe it. Jeremiah put the envelope back in his wallet and stood up. One more bill to stall. One more meal to skip. One more night, telling himself he could stretch what could not be stretched. He clocked out, grabbed his worn black coat, and stepped outside. The air was cool and smelled like exhaust and rain. He walked to his old sedan, the paint faded, the check engine light a steady orange eye on the dash. The engine coughed, then finally turned over. Tomorrow night, he'd be back, smiling, serving, watching the jar, and writing down the lie. What he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that 2 nights earlier, on the other side of town, a man in a corner office had opened an email that would reach all the way down to him. An email with only 4 words in the subject line: check your tip pool. And it had not let that man rest. 2 nights earlier, the city glimmered through the panoramic windows of the Sterling Tower, 40 floors above the noise, the traffic, and the people who made restaurants run. Up here, everything felt distant. Leonard Hale sat behind a walnut desk the size of a dinner table. He was in his mid-50s, fit, clean-shaven, silver at the temples, the kind of man who could look calm while holding a storm behind his eyes. The owner of the Lantern Room, and 4 other polished hotels scattered across the Midwest. Tonight, though, he couldn't focus on his spreadsheets. He couldn't focus on the wine program proposal sitting bookmarked on his screen. He couldn't even focus on the view, the very view that had once made him feel proud, because that anonymous email sat open in front of him. Check your tip pool. No greeting, no name, no explanation. Just a single sentence that hit like a cold wind. At first, he'd almost deleted it. He received dozens of strange messages a month, complaints from people who'd never eaten at his hotel, glowing praise from bots, and the weekly "please invest in my idea" messages that went straight to junk. But this one felt different. It felt pointed, quiet, intentional. Leonard leaned back slowly, rubbing the bridge of his nose. He tried to shake off the unease, but it clung to him. His father's framed photograph stared back from the shelf, broad grin, sleeves rolled up, hands calloused from decades of kitchen life. His father had built their first hotel from nothing. His father believed that leadership meant knowing the dishwasher's name, not just the investors. Leonard turned toward that photograph. "What am I not seeing?" he whispered. He found himself opening the scheduling directory, something he hardly checked anymore. Managers handled the details. He handled the vision. Server schedules loaded on the screen. His eye caught one name he remembered vaguely from a holiday party years ago: Jeremiah Brooks. He was a senior server at the Lantern Room. Tenure, 6 years. Notes, dependable, well-liked. But his schedule didn't match that. "Why is he on so many dead shifts?" Leonard murmured. Monday lunches, Tuesday early dinners, not a single weekend prime shift in the last 2 months. It made no sense, not for someone with his record. Next, Leonard opened the banking log for manager deposits, a routine report, not usually interesting. But tonight, he scanned it line by line. Blake Carter's name appeared over and over. Deposit amounts were odd: $935, $880, $790. Never round numbers, never consistent with payroll or bonuses. Something about them made the unease tighten inside his chest. He clicked again. Tip reconciliation spreadsheets. Credit card tips for customers were recorded by the point-of-sale system. Manager reported totals were manually entered at the end of each night. He pulled one example at random. A table had left a $42 tip. POS recorded it correctly. Manager entry, $16. Leonard's heart thumped once, hard. He checked another. A $60 tip became $25. Another turned $30 into $12. The numbers kept slipping, dropping, disappearing. It was like watching a dam leak, one brick at a time. "Oh no," he whispered. He opened the server turnover files next. 16 employees had left the lantern room in the past year. Most were servers, a handful of bussers, 2 bartenders. He clicked the exit interviews, short notes he normally skimmed. Concerns about fairness in tip counts. Manager hostile when I asked questions. Felt like something was wrong. All marked by Blake Carter as resolved. Leonard felt that storm behind his eyes start to build. He stood abruptly and crossed the office to the far wall, where his father's handwritten motto hung framed behind glass. "Take care of the people who take care of you." He placed his palm against the frame, jaw clenched. "What have I been doing?" he whispered. He thought of the dinners he'd attended, the conferences, the polished speeches he'd given about leadership and values. Meanwhile, something rotten had grown right under his nose. He grabbed his phone and opened his calendar. Deleted a wine-tasting event he absolutely should have attended. Canceled a board call. Canceled a dinner with investors. He replaced them all with one line. Friday, 6:45 p.m. Lantern room, undercover. He stared at it for a long beat. His suit felt suddenly heavy, like it belonged to someone further away from the truth than he'd ever meant to be. That wasn't who his father raised. It wasn't who he wanted to be. He closed his laptop. Tomorrow night, he wouldn't walk in as the owner. He'd walk in as a tired man with little money and a worn jacket, one who could see the restaurant not from the clouds, but from the floor. He'd see what his staff lived every day. He'd find out who was lifting the place up, and who was tearing it down. Leonard turned off the lights and stepped out into the hallway, the city stretching far below him like a bed of stars. He didn't know yet that within 24 hours, a single quiet black waiter would teach him more about leadership than any boardroom ever had. He didn't know that one act of kindness, a meal slid onto a plate without expectation, would change everything. But he would, very soon. Friday evening arrived with the kind of quiet tension only an upscale restaurant can carry. Soft lights, hushed voices, the flick of wine glasses catching the glow. But outside, on the sidewalk beneath the lantern room's grand awning, a man stood who didn't look like he belonged there at all. Leonard Hale tugged the sleeves of a faded work jacket he'd bought earlier that afternoon. It smelled faintly of paint and cold air. His jeans were scuffed. His boots had seen more years than most of the guests inside. He had shoved exactly $15 into his pocket, just enough for fries and a tip if he didn't take the bus home. A far cry from the suits and silk ties he normally wore. He took a quiet breath, one last moment of stillness, then pushed open the heavy glass door. Inside, the restaurant was alive. The baby grand piano hummed through a soft tune. White tablecloths glowed under warm light. Servers moved in smooth practice lines. And there, moving between tables with a tray balanced on one hand, was the man Leonard had come to see. Jeremiah Brooks. Up close, he looked even more exhausted than he had in his employee photo. Lean build, steady hands, shoulders carrying a familiar kind of weight. The weight of someone who had been pushing through it for years. Even so, his posture was respectful, his smile calm. Something about him radiated quiet patience. Leonard took a seat at the bar. The bartender glanced at him and hesitated barely a second. He looked like a man who wouldn't order much and might not tip at all. "I'll get someone to take care of you," the bartender said politely, already turning away. Jeremiah was the one who answered the call. He approached with the soft, steady step of someone who'd had a long shift but wasn't about to let anyone see it. "Good evening," Jeremiah said, setting a napkin down gently in front of him. "What can I get you to drink tonight?" Leonard kept his voice low and tired, just another man at the end of a long week. "Just water," he said. "And, what's your cheapest thing?" Jeremiah paused just for a beat, not in judgment, in understanding. "Cheapest is fries," he said quietly. $9. Leonard swallowed. "All right, I'll take that." Jeremiah nodded, writing it down, but he didn't walk away. He stood there a moment longer, studying the lines of Leonard's face, the worn jacket, the worn expression. "Long day?" Jeremiah asked gently. Leonard almost forgot to stay in character. Jeremiah's tone felt like a hand on the shoulder. "Something like that," Leonard replied. Jeremiah gave a single, slow nod, then leaned in slightly, voice lower. "Kitchen made an extra plate tonight," he said. "Happens sometimes. If you want something real to eat, I can bring it over." Leonard blinked. A full entree here went for $24, sometimes more. This man, who he now suspected was being robbed blind every night, was offering to risk something for him. "I can't pay for that," Leonard said softly. Jeremiah met his eyes, warm brown, steady, tired but kind. "No one's paying for it," Jeremiah said. "It'll get tossed if I don't bring it out. Might as well go to someone who could use it." Leonard felt something tighten in his throat. This man, this stranger, was giving him more dignity than Leonard had given his staff in years. Yeah." Leonard swallowed hard. "Thank you." Jeremiah nodded once, almost shyly, and walked back toward the kitchen. Leonard watched him go. Slow steps, a slight limp he hadn't noticed before, a hand that pressed softly against his lower back when he thought no one was looking. This was not a man who should be living on scraps. Minutes later, Jeremiah returned with a full plate, seared chicken with roasted vegetables, fresh bread, a side salad, and, almost unbelievably, a small chocolate custard. "Chocolate helps," Jeremiah said simply, setting it down. Leonard stared at the food, then up at Jeremiah. "Are you sure?" he asked, trying to keep the tremor out of his voice. "Positive," Jeremiah said. "Eat. You look like you need it." He walked away before Leonard could say anything else. Leonard picked up the fork. The first bite tasted like someone had fed him kindness. But before Leonard could get through half the plate, a sharp voice cut across the hum of the dining room. "Jeremiah, my office, now." Blake. Jeremiah stiffened slightly before he turned. He tried to hide it, but Leonard saw the dread flash across his face. Leonard shifted in his seat, pretending not to watch, while watching everything. Near the server station, Blake stood with arms folded, jaw tight. Jeremiah approached with the quiet obedience of someone who had survived too many of these moments already. "You giving away food now?" Blake hissed. "You running your own special program I don't know about?" Jeremiah kept his voice level. "It was extra, Blake. Kitchen mistake. It would have gone in the trash. That's not your call." Blake stepped closer. "That's a $24 entree. You don't give away a dime unless I say so." Jeremiah pressed his lips together. Blake leaned in, voice low, cold. "That's coming out of your tips tonight. And next week, fewer shifts. Maybe you'll think twice before playing hero." Jeremiah didn't speak, didn't protest, just took it, like someone who had no other safe option. Then Blake walked off, smug and satisfied. For a moment, Jeremiah stood frozen, shoulders tight. Then he turned back to the dining room and resumed working, with a polite expression carved over the disappointment. Leonard's hands curled into fists. He had just watched a man steal kindness from someone who barely had anything left. He'd seen enough, but he stayed in character. He had to finish this night the way he started it. He had to see every angle. Jeremiah approached him again, the professional smile back, but thinner, dimmer. "How's the chicken?" he asked. Leonard forced his voice steady. "It's good," he said, "but you didn't have to do that." Jeremiah gave a small, tired smile. "Trust me," he said. "I did." He walked away again, back into the rush of orders, plates, and expectations. Leonard watched him disappear into the chaos. And for the first time in years, Leonard saw clearly what kind of man stood in front of him. Not just a server, not just an employee. A good man in a broken system. A man the world kept taking from, but who kept giving anyway. A man who deserved better. And before the night was over, Leonard would see the truth for himself. Every dollar stolen, every shift manipulated, every kindness punished. And Blake Carter would learn that the man he'd just threatened wasn't alone anymore. The dinner rush thinned out slowly, like a wave pulling back into the dark. The piano player packed up. The host stand emptied. The bar lights dimmed to that soft glow reserved for late hours and tired hearts. Leonard stayed seated long after his plate was cleared, hands wrapped around a water glass he wasn't drinking. He wasn't thinking about the food anymore. He was thinking about the way Jeremiah had stood there, shoulders tight, smile fading, after Blake punished him for kindness. He was thinking about all the numbers that hadn't matched, all the quiet warnings stuffed into anonymous emails, all the details he had ignored while he floated above it all in his tower office. Tonight, the distance was gone. Tonight, he could feel the truth. Jeremiah passed by once more, checking in, voice steady, eyes dim. When he saw the $10 bill Leonard had left, more than half of what Leonard had walked in with, he hesitated. "You don't have to do that," Jeremiah said softly. "You didn't have to do a lot of things," Leonard replied. For a long second, they simply looked at one another. Jeremiah's expression shifted. Confusion, recognition, something like gratitude, something like worry. And then he nodded once. "Have a safe night," Jeremiah said and went back to closing tasks. But Leonard didn't leave. Not yet. He waited until Jeremiah hung up his apron and disappeared into the back hallway, toward the employee exit. And then Leonard quietly slipped outside, circling to the alley behind the lantern room. The night air was cold enough to sting. Steam rose from the kitchen vents. A half-lit security lamp hummed overhead, washing the pavement in pale yellow. Leonard kept to the shadows. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 15. Finally, the back door creaked open. Jeremiah stepped into the cold, pulling his coat around him. His breath fogged as he leaned against the brick wall, shoulders sagging with exhaustion deeper than a single night could explain. He reached into his jacket pocket, and Leonard's breath caught. A manila envelope, worn edges, folded corners. Jeremiah opened it and took out a small slip of paper. He wrote carefully under the security light, slow, precise strokes, then slid it into the growing stack inside the envelope. Leonard could see the way his hand trembled slightly when he tucked the envelope back into his coat. He recognized that tremble. It was the tremble of someone carrying a too heavy truth, all alone. Jeremiah stood there for a moment, just breathing, his face set in a quiet, private pain no guest in the dining room would ever imagine. Then he headed toward a parking space halfway down the alley, where an aging sedan sat with a dented bumper and a stubborn engine. Leonard watched the headlights flicker and the motor cough 3 times before catching. He let Jeremiah drive off before stepping out of the shadows. The alley felt emptier without him, like something important had slipped through Leonard's fingers. But not this time. He pulled out his phone and typed a message to his IT director. "I need access to all security footage from the last 8 weeks. Manager's office and tip count area. Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. A reply came instantly. "Everything okay?" Leonard stared at the screen, then typed back, "No, but it will be." Saturday morning, 7:03 a.m. The Sterling Tower office felt colder than usual. Leonard sat with 2 monitors glowing in front of him. James, his IT director, drank coffee like it was survival. "We're pulling footage from all cameras," James said, fingers flying across the keys. "There's a lot of it. You sure you want every minute?" "Every minute," Leonard said. His voice didn't waver. They started with the footage from earlier that week. A black and white view of the bar area. Servers dropping tips into the glass jar. Blake turning his back, shoulders hunched just enough to block the view. "Zoom in," Leonard said. James zoomed. The resolution sharpened. There, clear as a confession, the slight dip of Blake's left arm into the jar. The quick slide of his right hand into his jacket. James swore under his breath. Leonard felt his stomach twist. "Next night," Leonard said quietly. They watched the next footage. Same jar, same angle, same motion. Next night, same pattern. Some nights, larger amounts. Some nights, smaller. Some nights, none at all. Almost as if Blake knew to pace himself. But the theft was there. Unmistakable. With every recorded dip of Blake's shoulder, Leonard's heart sank deeper. "You seeing this?" James asked, voice low. "Oh, I'm seeing it," Leonard said. He clicked over to Blake's deposit records from the last 2 months. $925, $810, $1,140, $760, all within hours of shifts where the tip pool had come up mysteriously short. A neat 1-to-1 pattern. A thief with a calculator. Leonard leaned back, the weight hitting him fully. "Keep going," he said. "We need the full picture." By noon, they had it. 43 separate thefts in 8 weeks. Over $12,000 stolen. And when James expanded the dates to the past year, the total climbed even higher. $30,000. James exhaled sharply. "That's felony-level theft." "No," Leonard said. "That's $30,000 taken from people living off tips. People with kids, medical bills, rent due." He swallowed hard. He pictured Jeremiah's manila envelope, the careful handwriting, the quiet resignation. "This ends Monday," Leonard said. James blinked. "Monday? I'm calling a staff meeting," Leonard said, voice steady with a resolve he hadn't felt in years. "And Blake will answer for every dollar." James nodded slowly. "What about Jeremiah?" he asked. Leonard didn't answer at first. He looked out the window, over the glittering city, down to the streets where people like Jeremiah walked to work every day. "Jeremiah," he said quietly, "is about to get back everything that was stolen from him. And more, much more." Monday morning arrived with the heaviness of a storm that hadn't yet broken. The Lantern Room's private conference room filled slowly. Servers in clean aprons, bartenders clutching travel mugs, bussers looking confused and nervous. Most had never been summoned to a mandatory all-hands meeting. Jeremiah stood near the back wall, arms folded loosely, trying to steady the thrum in his chest. He knew something was coming. He didn't know what. Blake sat up front in a crisp suit, legs crossed, completely relaxed. Too relaxed. He nodded to each employee like a king acknowledging subjects. Probably a new policy update, he whispered to the bartender beside him. Nothing exciting. Then the door opened, and Leonard Hale walked in. In a suit, not the thrift store jacket from Friday night. But Jeremiah recognized him instantly. His breath caught. It was him, the man he fed. The man who had offered $10 as if it were a treasure. The man he'd spoken to, honestly, without knowing who he really was. Whispers swept through the room. That's the owner. Why is he here? What's happening? Blake straightened so fast his chair squeaked. Mr. Hale, he said, smile tense. You didn't tell me you were coming. Leonard didn't answer. He simply walked to the conference table, set down his laptop, and connected it to the projector. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a calm, steady authority that silenced the entire room. Friday night, he said. I sat at the bar wearing an $8 jacket and $15 in my pocket. A beat of stunned silence. Jeremiah felt the floor tilt beneath him. Leonard continued. I wanted to see how this place ran when no one knew I was watching. He looked directly at Jeremiah. And I want to begin by saying this. One of you showed me more decency and more dignity than I've earned lately. Jeremiah's face warmed. He looked down. He didn't want the room staring at him. Leonard turned toward everyone. I ordered the cheapest item on the menu, and Jeremiah Brooks brought me a full meal, quietly, without drawing attention, and without asking for anything in return. A few co-workers turned to look at Jeremiah with wide eyes. He saw a man who looked tired and hungry, Leonard said, and he chose kindness. Jeremiah swallowed hard. Blake shifted in his seat, uncomfortable now. And then, Leonard said, voice lowering, I watched how that kindness was punished. The room stilled. He clicked his laptop. On the screen appeared footage from the tip counting area. Black and white. Clear as the morning sun. Blake turning his back. Blake dipping his hand into the jar. Blake stuffing bills into his jacket. Gasps filled the room. Leonard advanced the video. Another night. Another theft. Another. 43 incidents in 8 weeks, Leonard said quietly. Over $12,000 stolen. Blake's face went paper white. This is taken from security cameras, Leonard said, raising his voice enough for everyone to hear. And every one of these nights, Blake reported lower totals to the tip pool. The room erupted in whispers. Anger, disbelief, shock. Leonard clicked again. On the screen appeared a spreadsheet with a long column of numbers. At the top, total theft across 12 months, $30,440. Blake pushed to his feet. This is taken out of context. I was adjusting for... Sit down, Leonard said, and something in his voice, something sharp and final, made Blake obey. Leonard scanned the room. These are not small mistakes, he said. This is not miscounting. This is theft from the very people who carry this restaurant every night. He clicked again. Another spreadsheet appeared, each employee's name and the amount stolen from them personally. Then Leonard read aloud. Nora Cruz, $6,220. Nora covered her mouth with trembling hands. Luis Herrera, $4,910. Luis let out a broken laugh, shaking his head. Tasha Green, $3,150. She wiped her eyes, And then, Jeremiah Brooks, $11,260. Jeremiah's knees wobbled. He sat down fast, breathing hard. He had known it was bad. He had not known it was that bad. Leonard closed the laptop softly. "Blake," he said, turning, "you are fired, effective immediately. You will gather your things and leave this building under escort, and you will not come near my staff again." A security guard stepped into the doorway. Blake sputtered, face red, voice cracked. "You can't. This is Jeremiah set me up. This is all because he—" "No," Leonard said. "This is because you stole from your team, and you did it while smiling in their faces." Blake didn't fight when security took him by the arm. He was gone within seconds. The room fell silent again, heavy with shock. Leonard looked at his staff, not as an owner, but as a man trying to repair something precious. "I failed you," he said. "I trusted the wrong person. I looked at numbers instead of people. I missed what was happening right in front of me." He paused, voice tightening. "But I promise you today, that ends." He pulled out a stack of envelopes. "These contain the exact amount stolen from each of you, plus interest. Every dollar Blake took is being returned." He walked the envelopes around the room himself. Hands shook as people took them. A few cried. A few whispered thank you again and again. When he reached Jeremiah, he held out an envelope thick enough to be life-changing. Jeremiah stared at Leonard, at the people watching. He took it with both hands. "Thank you," Jeremiah whispered. "You earned it," Leonard replied. But Leonard wasn't finished. He returned to the front of the room. "There's more," he said. "Real, lasting changes start today." He opened a folder. No more mandatory tip pooling. Every server keeps what they earn. All tip records will be printed and posted weekly. No exceptions. A new anonymous reporting system goes live today. Any complaint goes directly to me. And retaliation, he looked at the door Blake had disappeared through, is grounds for immediate termination. People nodded, some still wiping tears. "And one more thing," Leonard said. He turned toward Jeremiah. "Jeremiah, I'd like to offer you a promotion, assistant floor manager, full salary, full benefits, including dependent medical coverage at zero out of pocket." Jeremiah froze. A few co-workers gasped. He swallowed hard, eyes blurring. "My daughter," he whispered. She needs insulin." "I know," Leonard said softly, "and she will get it." Jeremiah bowed his head as his shoulders shook, quiet, overwhelmed, grateful. When he finally looked up, his voice was steady again. "I accept." That night, the lantern room felt different. Brighter somehow, lighter. Jeremiah walked the dining room not with the exhaustion of a man carrying a burden, but with the quiet confidence of someone finally able to breathe. A man at the bar, paint-stained jacket, tired eyes, asked him, "Hey man, what's the cheapest thing you've got?" Jeremiah smiled gently. "We've got extra chicken tonight," he said. "Mind if I bring you something real?" The man blinked, surprised. "Are you sure?" Jeremiah nodded, voice soft but sure. "Absolutely. Trust me," he said. "Everyone deserves to feel seen." He walked away, heart full, and for the first time in a very long time, the world finally felt right.